The train whistle pierced the summer air as Ophelia Langley pressed her face against the window, watching the rugged landscape of Wyoming Territory unfold before her. It was 1878, and with every mile of track that stretched behind her, she felt the weight of Boston and all its painful memories grow just a little lighter. "Desdemona coming up, folks. Next stop, Desdemona," the conductor called out, moving through the passenger car. Ophelia gathered her modest belongings, a carpet bag containing her clothes, a small wooden box of keepsakes she couldn't bear to leave behind, and the letter from her Aunt Martha offering her a position in the general store. As the train slowed, she caught her reflection in the glass. The dark circles under her eyes told the story of sleepless nights and tear-stained pillows, but she had promised herself that no one in Desdemona would ever know about Charles, about the scandal, about the heartbreak that had driven her 2,000 miles west. The platform was little more than wooden planks beside a single-room station house. Ophelia stepped down from the train, her city boots immediately gathering dust from the unpaved street. Desdemona, Wyoming was nothing like the Boston she had left behind. A single dirt road stretched through the center of town, lined with wooden buildings that had weathered countless seasons. The imposing Rocky Mountains loomed in the distance, a constant reminder of just how far she'd traveled to escape her past. Miss Langley. A plump woman with gray streaked hair approached her. "I'm Martha Carter, your aunt's friend. She asked me to collect you. I'm afraid she couldn't make it herself, busy day at the store." "Thank you for meeting me," Ophelia replied, trying to mask her exhaustion with a polite smile. As they walked toward Martha's wagon, a commotion erupted from the saloon across the street. The batwing doors burst open and a man came flying out, landing hard in the street. A taller figure followed, his movements calm and controlled despite the obvious confrontation. "That'll teach you to cheat honest men, Barker," the tall man said, his voice carrying across the street. He wore a well-worn Stetson pulled low over his eyes, dusty denim trousers, and a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned forearms. "Isaac Everett," Martha explained, noticing Ophelia's stare. "Ranch foreman at the Triple Pine. Fair man, but not one to cross." She clucked her tongue. "Town's been more settled since he took over keeping the peace when Sheriff Miller broke his leg last month." Ophelia watched as Isaac Everett dusted off his hands and turned toward them. For a brief moment, their eyes met across the dusty street, and something in his steady gaze made her breath catch. She quickly looked away, but not before noticing the slight tip of his hat in her direction. "Come along, dear," Martha urged. "The dust out here isn't good for city lungs." As they drove toward the edge of town, Ophelia couldn't help but glance back, only to find Isaac Everett still watching her from the boardwalk, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat. The general store sat at the end of Desdemona's Main Street, a two-story building with living quarters above the shop. Ophelia's Aunt Martha was a short, wiry woman with the same amber eyes as Ophelia's mother, though the resemblance ended there. "So this is my brother's girl," Aunt Martha said, appraising Ophelia with a critical eye. "You're prettier than your daguerreotype, I'll say that much, but too thin. We'll fix that." She gestured around the store. "This is it. Not fancy like your Boston shops, but we carry everything folks around here need." Ophelia nodded, overwhelmed by the sense of coffee beans, leather, and tobacco that filled the store. "I'm grateful for the opportunity, Aunt Martha." "Don't be grateful yet. It's hard work. You'll earn your keep." Martha's stern expression softened slightly. "Your father's letter said you needed a fresh start. Well, the West is good for that. No one asks too many questions out here, so long as you pull your weight." That night, in the small bedroom above the store, Ophelia unpacked her few belongings. She placed the wooden box on the bedside table but couldn't bring herself to open it. Inside were Charles's letters, the pressed flower from their first meeting, and the small diamond ring she'd returned to him that terrible night when everything fell apart. She went to the window and looked out over the quiet street. Desdemona was already settled for the night, only the saloon showing signs of life with its glowing windows and occasional bursts of laughter. The vast Wyoming sky stretched overhead, studded with more stars than she'd ever seen in Boston. It was beautiful, yes, but also terrifying in its vastness, much like the uncertain future that lay before her. In the weeks that followed, Ophelia threw herself into work at the store. She learned to weigh flour and sugar, to measure fabric for the ranchers' wives, and to keep the ledger with the same precision she'd once applied to her piano playing. The work left her exhausted each night, too tired to dream of Charles or the life she'd left behind. It was a Tuesday morning when Isaac Everett walked into the store, the bell above the door announcing his arrival. Ophelia was alone, Aunt Martha having gone to visit a sick friend. "Morning, Miss Langley," he said, removing his hat. His dark hair was slightly damp, suggesting he'd made an effort to tidy himself before coming to town. "Good morning, Mr. Everett," she replied, surprised he knew her name. "What can I help you with today? Need some coffee, sugar, and—" He paused, eyes moving around the store as if searching for inspiration. "And some of that peppermint candy." She raised an eyebrow. "The peppermint candy that no grown man ever buys for himself." A smile cracked through his serious expression. "Caught me. It's for Molly Henderson. Her pa works for me, and it's her birthday tomorrow." Ophelia found herself smiling back as she gathered his items. When she reached for the glass jar of peppermint sticks, she had to stretch to her full height. A sharp pain shot through her ribs, a lingering reminder of the night Charles had pushed her down the stairs when she'd threatened to expose his gambling debts. She winced involuntarily, and Isaac was at her side in an instant. "Let me," he said, easily reaching past her to retrieve the jar. His eyes, the color of the Wyoming sky after a storm, studied her with concern. "Thank you," she said, stepping back to put distance between them. The last thing she wanted was another man's help or his pity. Isaac placed the jar on the counter but didn't move away. "Town's talking about the social next Saturday. Will you be attending?" "I haven't decided." In truth, Aunt Martha had been encouraging her to go, insisting it was time she met more of the community. "It's nothing fancy," he continued, "but the music's good and Mrs. Reynolds makes a peach pie that almost makes up for everything else we lack out here." Something in his unassuming manner made her defenses falter. "Perhaps I will then," he nodded, paid for his purchases, and headed for the door. Before leaving, he turned back. "Miss Langley, welcome to Desdemona. I hope you find what you're looking for here." After he left, Ophelia found herself touching the spot where her ribs had healed wrong, wondering if anyone could really start over in a place like this. Saturday arrived with clear skies and a cool breeze that provided relief from the summer heat. The social was held in the town hall, a plain building that had been transformed with paper lanterns and wildflowers gathered from the surrounding prairie. Ophelia wore her second-best dress, a deep blue that Aunt Martha said matched her eyes. She'd pinned her chestnut hair in a simple style, adorned only with a ribbon that had somehow survived her journey west. The hall was already filled with most of Desdemona's residents when they arrived. A small band played in the corner, and several couples moved around the floor in a lively dance. "There's Mrs. Henderson and her husband," Aunt Martha said, guiding Ophelia through the crowd. "And that's Doc Williams, you remember. I told you about his miraculous surgery on the Miller boy last winter." Ophelia nodded politely, feeling overwhelmed by the number of new faces and names. Then the crowd parted, and she saw Isaac Everett across the room. He was speaking with an older man but looking directly at her. When their eyes met, he excused himself and made his way toward them. "Miss Langley, Mrs. Carter," he greeted them. "Glad you could make it, Mr. Everett," Ophelia acknowledged. Up close, she noticed he'd made an effort for the occasion. His dark hair was neatly combed, and he wore a clean white shirt under a vest that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. "Would you care to dance?" he asked, extending his hand. Before Ophelia could respond, Aunt Martha nudged her forward. She'd be delighted. The girl's been cooped up in that store for weeks. Ophelia shot her aunt an exasperated look, but allowed Isaac to lead her to the dance floor. The band was playing a waltz familiar territory from her Boston days, though the musicians here lacked the polish she was accustomed to. "I should warn you," she said as they took position. "I was trained in Boston ballrooms. I might be overly formal." Isaac's hand settled lightly at her waist. "And I learned from watching cowhands at campfires. We'll meet somewhere in the middle." His honesty made her laugh, and to her surprise, he was a better dancer than he'd let on. They moved easily together, and for the first time since arriving in Desdemona, Ophelia felt something other than grief or numbness. When the dance ended, he didn't immediately release her hand. "You've been avoiding the town gatherings," he observed. "I've been adjusting." He nodded as if her vague answer made perfect sense. "It takes time. I wasn't born here either." This surprised her. "Where are you from originally?" "St. Louis. Came west after the war, wanted open spaces and fewer ghosts." He glanced over her shoulder. "Speaking of ghosts, Mrs. Reynolds is heading this way with her daughter. She's been trying to match me with Clara for 2 years now." Ophelia felt a flicker of disappointment, which she immediately tried to suppress. "Don't let me keep you, then." "That's not," Isaac began, but they were already interrupted by a plump woman and a younger version of herself, both wearing identical expressions of determination. "Mr. Everett, we were hoping you'd save a dance for Clara," Mrs. Reynolds announced. Isaac nodded politely. "Of course, Mrs. Reynolds. After I get Miss Langley some punch." He guided Ophelia away with a gentle hand at her elbow. When they reached the refreshment table, he leaned close enough that she could smell the faint scent of pine and leather that seemed to cling to him. "Would you walk outside with me?" "Just for a few minutes." She knew she should decline. A proper Boston lady would never slip outside unchaperoned with a man she barely knew, but Ophelia was tired of being proper. It had brought her nothing but pain in the end. "Yes," she said simply. They stepped out onto the small porch of the town hall. The night air was cool and filled with the songs of crickets and the distant howl of a coyote. The stars overhead seemed close enough to touch. "It's beautiful," Ophelia murmured, looking up. "One thing the West has plenty of is sky," Isaac replied, standing beside her with a respectful distance between them. "When I first came here, I'd sleep outside just to look at it. Made me feel small, but in a good way. Like my troubles weren't as big as I thought." She glanced at him. "And did it work? Did your troubles get smaller?" "Some did. Others just changed shape." He turned to face her. "What are you running from, Miss Langley?" The directness of his question startled her. "What makes you think I'm running from anything?" "People come west for 3 reasons: land, gold, or to leave something behind. You don't strike me as the land or gold type." Ophelia gripped the porch railing, suddenly feeling exposed. "My past is my own, Mr. Everett." "Fair enough," he agreed easily. "But if you ever want to talk about it, I'm a good listener, and I don't gossip." Before she could respond, the door opened behind them and Clara Reynolds peered out. "There you are, Mr. Everett. Mother said you promised me a dance." Isaac gave Ophelia an apologetic look. "Duty calls." He offered Clara his arm and led her back inside. leaving Ophelia alone with the stars and her thoughts. Later that night, as she lay in bed listening to the occasional sounds from the saloon down the street, Ophelia found herself thinking about Isaac Everett's question. What was she running from? The simple answer was Charles Blackwell, the man who had courted her, proposed to her, and then revealed himself to be a monster behind closed doors. But it was more than that. She was running from her own naivety, from the shame of not seeing through his charming facade, and from the whispers that had followed her after she'd broken the engagement. Sleep eluded her, so she lit a lamp and finally opened the wooden box she'd brought from Boston. Charles's letters were there, full of pretty words that had meant nothing in the end. The pressed flower of forget-me-not, ironically, had faded to a ghostly blue. And the ring, a diamond that had once seemed to represent everything she wanted, now looked cold and lifeless in the lamplight. Ophelia took a deep breath and gathered everything into her hands. Tomorrow, she decided, she would burn it all. It was time to truly leave the past behind. The following morning brought a sense of purpose. After breakfast, Ophelia took the wooden box out behind the store where there was a small fire pit used for burning trash. She knelt beside it, struck a match, and watched as the flame caught the edge of Charles's first letter. Bad news, she startled, nearly dropping the burning paper. Isaac Everett stood a few feet away, leading his horse by the reins. "Mr. Everett," she acknowledged, quickly gathering the remaining items back into the box. "I didn't hear you approach. Sorry to startle you." He tied his horse to a nearby post and came closer, his expression curious but not intrusive. Burning correspondence usually means either bad news or bad memories. Ophelia considered deflecting again, but found she didn't have the energy. "The latter." Isaac nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Sometimes that's the best way to handle them." He gestured to the small fire. "Need more kindling." Despite herself, Ophelia laughed. "Are you offering to help me burn my past, if that's what you need?" His voice was serious now. "Everyone deserves a fresh start, Miss Langley." Something about his quiet certainty broke through the walls she'd built. "It was a man," she admitted. "In Boston, I thought he was. Everything I wanted, I was wrong." Isaac didn't press for details. Instead, he knelt beside her and added a few small sticks to the fire, building it carefully. "Seems to me that makes him the fool, not you." Ophelia looked at him, surprised by his words. No one had put it that way before. In Boston, even those who sympathized had treated her with a certain pity, as if her judgment was fundamentally flawed. "Thank you," she said softly. They sat in companionable silence as she fed the letters one by one into the fire. When she reached for the ring box, her hand trembled slightly. "He proposed," she explained, opening the box to reveal the diamond. "And when I discovered what kind of man he truly was and tried to end it, She trailed off, unable to speak the words aloud. Isaac's expression darkened. "Did he hurt you?" Ophelia nodded, her fingers unconsciously moving to her ribs. "The night I returned the ring." A muscle worked in Isaac's jaw, but his voice remained gentle. "No wonder you came west." 2,000 miles didn't seem far enough at first, she admitted. "But lately, I've been thinking it might be just right." With a deep breath, she removed the ring from its velvet nest and held it over the flames. "This was worth a small fortune in Boston." "Worth nothing if it carries bad memories," Isaac countered. "No," she agreed and let the ring fall into the fire. They watched as the gold band began to glow red among the embers. Later, after Isaac had gone on his way and the fire had burned down to ash, Ophelia returned to the store feeling lighter than she had in months. Aunt Martha noticed the change immediately. "Something happened," she observed as Ophelia hummed while arranging a display of canned goods. "And I suspect it has something to do with Isaac Everett stopping by earlier." Ophelia felt her cheeks warm. "We just talked." Aunt Martha raised an eyebrow but didn't press. "Well, whatever you just did, it suits you. First time I've seen you look truly alive since you stepped off that train." The following weeks brought a gradual shift in Ophelia's life in Desdemona. She began accepting invitations to Sunday dinners and afternoon teas, slowly forming friendships with other women in town. She even joined the small choir that sang at the church, rediscovering her love of music that had been dormant since leaving Boston. Isaac Everett became a regular visitor to the general store, often finding reasons to come to town that seemed flimsy at best. Sometimes he brought small gifts, a wildflower he claimed was just growing by the road, or a book he thought she might enjoy. They would talk while she filled his orders, conversations that grew deeper with each visit. One afternoon, in late September, he arrived looking more serious than usual. "Miss Langley," he began, then corrected himself. "Ophelia, if I may. I'm heading to Cheyenne tomorrow on business. I'll be gone about a week." "I see," she replied, trying to hide her disappointment. Their conversations had become the highlight of her days. "I hope your business is successful." "Thank you." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "I found this and thought of you." He placed a small object on the counter between them, a silver hair comb with a delicate pattern of forget-me-nots. Ophelia's breath caught. She hadn't told him about the pressed flower she'd burned, about its significance. "It's beautiful," she said, touching it gently. "I noticed you sometimes struggle to keep your hair in place when you're working," he explained, a hint of color rising in his cheeks. "And the flowers reminded me of your eyes." The gesture was so thoughtful, so different from Charles's grand but hollow displays, that Ophelia felt tears threatening. "Thank you. I'll think of you when I wear it." His eyes brightened. "I'd like that." After he left, Aunt Martha emerged from the storeroom. "That man is sweet on you," she declared. "And unless I'm completely mistaken, you feel the same." Ophelia couldn't deny it. Over the past months, Isaac had shown himself to be everything Charles was not: honest, kind, and genuinely respectful of her thoughts and feelings. But the memory of her past mistake made her cautious. "I'm not sure I'm ready," she admitted. Aunt Martha's expression softened. "Ready or not, girl, life doesn't wait. Isaac Everett is a good man, and good men in these parts are as rare as diamonds." The week of Isaac's absence dragged by, each day seeming longer than the last. Ophelia wore the silver comb daily, finding comfort in the small connection to him. When Saturday arrived with no sign of his return, she tried not to let disappointment cloud her mood as she closed the store. She was sweeping the front porch when the sound of hoofbeats drew her attention. A rider was approaching fast, too fast for the town's main street. As he came closer, she recognized with a jolt of fear that it was Thomas Henderson, one of Isaac's ranch hands. "Miss Langley," he called, reining his horse to a stop. "Is Doc Williams here? I believe he's at the Reynolds place. Their youngest has a fever. What's happened?" Thomas's face was grim. "It's Mr. Everett. There was trouble in Cheyenne. He's been shot." The world seemed to tilt beneath Ophelia's feet. "Shot? How badly?" "Bad enough. We got him back to the ranch, but he needs a doctor." Thomas was already turning his horse. "I'll fetch Doc Williams." "Mr. Everett was asking for you, though. Said to tell you he's sorry about being late." Before she could respond, he was galloping toward the Reynolds homestead. Ophelia stood frozen for only a moment before rushing inside. "Aunt Martha, I need to borrow your wagon. Isaac's been hurt." 20 minutes later, Ophelia was driving the wagon as fast as she dared toward the Triple Pine Ranch, her heart pounding with fear. The ranch was 5 miles outside of town, a sprawling property nestled against the foothills of the mountains. As she approached, she saw several men gathered outside the main house, their expressions grave. "Miss Langley," one of them acknowledged as she pulled the wagon to a stop. "He's inside. Mrs. Henderson is with him." Ophelia hurried into the house, following the sound of voices to a bedroom at the back. Sarah Henderson, the wife of Isaac's foreman, looked up with relief when Ophelia entered. "Thank goodness you've come. He's been calling for you." Isaac lay on the bed, his face pale and drawn with pain. His shirt had been removed and a bloodied bandage covered his left shoulder. His eyes were closed, but they flickered open when Ophelia approached. "You came," he whispered, a weak smile touching his lips. "Of course I came." She moved to his side, taking his hand in hers. It was warm, too warm. Fever had already set in. "What happened?" "Cattle rustlers," he explained, his voice strained. "Caught up with them in Cheyenne. There was a fight." He winced as a wave of pain washed over him. "Not how I planned to return." Ophelia squeezed his hand. "Save your strength. Doc Williams is on his way." Sarah Henderson quietly excused herself, leaving them alone. As soon as she was gone, Isaac's expression grew more serious. "Ophelia, I need to say something." "In case don't," she interrupted fiercely. "Don't you dare speak as if you're not going to recover." A weak chuckle escaped him. "Stubborn woman. Fine, but I'm still saying it. These past months, knowing you, it's been the best time of my life. I think I've been falling in love with you since the day you arrived in Desdemona." Ophelia felt tears spring to her eyes. After Charles, she'd convinced herself she would never trust those words again. Yet hearing them from Isaac, even in these circumstances, filled her with unexpected joy. "Isaac Everett, that is not a proper deathbed confession because you are not dying. But—" She leaned closer, pressing her forehead to his. "I think I've been falling in love with you too." His hand tightened around hers. "Then I definitely can't die. We have too much to talk about." The arrival of Doc Williams interrupted any further conversation. The next few hours were tense as the doctor removed the bullet and cleaned the wound, declaring that Isaac was fortunate the bullet had missed any vital organs, but had caused significant blood loss. "He'll need careful tending," Doc Williams told Ophelia as he packed his bag. "Fever is the real danger now. Keep the wound clean and try to get fluids into him when he's conscious." Ophelia nodded, already rolling up her sleeves. "I'll stay with him." "I figured as much," the doctor replied with a knowing look. "Mrs. Henderson will show you what needs to be done. I'll return tomorrow to check on him." For the next 3 days, Ophelia barely left Isaac's side. She bathed his forehead when the fever raged, changed his bandages, and spooned broth between his lips during his lucid moments. At night, she dozed in a chair beside his bed, waking at his slightest movement. On the 4th day, she woke to find him watching her, his eyes clearer than they had been since the shooting. "You're still here," he murmured. Ophelia straightened in her chair, wincing at the stiffness in her neck. "Where else would I be? You look exhausted." "And you look better," she countered, touching his forehead. "The fever's broken." He caught her hand and brought it to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm. "Thank you for staying, for everything." Ophelia felt herself blush. "Doc Williams did the hard part." "Not true, you fought for me. I could hear you even when I was delirious with fever. You kept telling me to fight to stay." She nodded, remembering the long nights when his fever had spiked dangerously high. "I wasn't ready to lose you." "Good," he said softly. "Because I have plans that involve you, Ophelia Langley. Plans that require me to be very much alive." The following weeks saw Isaac's gradual recovery. As October gave way to November, he regained his strength enough to begin short walks outside, always with Ophelia by his side. They would stroll the perimeter of the ranch house, talking about everything and nothing: his childhood in Missouri, her life in Boston before Charles, their shared love of music and books. One crisp afternoon, as golden leaves drifted down around them, Isaac led her to a small rise overlooking the ranch. "I wanted to show you this," he said, gesturing to the view. The triple pines spread out below them, acres of good grazing land, a creek winding through the property, and the mountains rising majestically in the distance. "What do you think?" "It's beautiful," Ophelia replied truthfully. "You've built something wonderful here." Isaac turned to face her. "I bought this land 8 years ago. It was nothing then, just soil and promise. I've poured everything into making it thrive." He took her hands in his. "But lately I've been thinking it's missing something important." Ophelia's heart began to beat faster. "What's that?" "A family. A future beyond just cattle and crops." His eyes, now fully restored to their intense blue, held her steadily. "I love you, Ophelia. I think I started loving you that first day in the general store when you challenged me about the peppermint candy." A smile spread across her face at the memory. "That was rather forward of me. It was honest. You've always been honest with me, even when it wasn't easy." He reached into his pocket and withdrew something small. "I'm not Charles Blackwell. I can't offer you fine Boston society or expensive gifts. But I can promise to respect you, listen to you, and love you every day for the rest of our lives." He opened his hand to reveal a simple gold band. "This was my mother's. I'd be honored if you would wear it as my wife." Tears blurred Ophelia's vision as the meaning of his words sank in. 6 months ago, she had arrived in Desdemona broken and afraid, certain she would never trust a man again. Yet here she stood, her heart full of a love deeper and truer than anything she had known before. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Isaac, I will marry you." His face lit up with a joy that matched her own. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Ophelia realized that she had indeed found what she was looking for in Desdemona, not just an escape from her past, but a future full of promise. They were married on Christmas Day, 1878, in the small church in Desdemona. Aunt Martha wept openly during the ceremony, later claiming it was just dust in her eye. The entire town turned out for the celebration, filling the town hall with music, laughter, and enough food to feed twice their number. As the new Mrs. Everett danced with her husband, Ophelia felt the last shadows of her past finally fade away. Charles Blackwell in Boston seemed like a distant dream or perhaps a nightmare from which she had finally awakened. "Happy?" Isaac asked, his arm secure around her waist as they moved across the floor. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly. "Thank you for helping me remember how to love again." He pulled her closer, his lips brushing her ear. "We're just getting started, Mrs. Everett. The best is yet to come." Spring of 1879 brought new beginnings to the Triple Pine Ranch. Ophelia had settled into her role as mistress of the house with enthusiasm, bringing touches of comfort and beauty to the once Spartan bachelor's residence. She started a small garden, planted flowering vines around the porch, and even convinced Isaac to add a piano to the front room, a wedding gift that had required a special trip to Cheyenne to procure. In the evenings, after the day's work was done, she would play while Isaac sat nearby, sometimes reading, sometimes just watching her with a contentment that made her heart swell. These quiet moments became sacred to them, both a peaceful end to often challenging days. The ranch prospered under their combined care. Isaac's business acumen paired with Ophelia's organizational skills proved to be a formidable combination. She took over the bookkeeping, revealing a head for numbers that surprised even herself, and began corresponding with cattle buyers in the East, opening new markets for the Triple Pines growing herd. By summer, there was another change on the horizon, one that Ophelia confirmed with both trepidation and joy. "A baby," Isaac repeated when she told him, his expression shifting from shock to wonder. "We're having a baby," she nodded, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. "Doc Williams says it should arrive in January." Isaac whooped with joy, lifting her into his arms and spinning her around until she laughingly protested. When he set her down, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "Are you crying, Mr. Everett?" she teased gently. "A man's allowed to cry when his wife tells him he's going to be a father," he replied, not bothering to wipe away the tears. "This ranch was always meant to be a legacy, something to pass on. Now that means so much more." As her pregnancy progressed, Ophelia found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The pain Charles had inflicted, both emotional and physical, had once seemed insurmountable. Yet here she was, creating a new life with a man who treated her with respect and tenderness, expecting a child they would raise together with love. Winter came early that year, with the first snow falling in November. By Christmas, the ranch was blanketed in white, and Ophelia's condition kept them from attending the town celebrations. Instead, they marked their first anniversary quietly at home, with Isaac insisting on doing all the cooking, an endeavor that resulted in slightly burned biscuits but perfectly roasted beef. "Not bad for a cowboy," Ophelia teased as they sat before the fire afterward. "I have many hidden talents," he replied with a wink. "Though cooking might not be the strongest." She laughed, then suddenly gasped, her hand flying to her rounded belly. Isaac was at her side instantly. "What is it? Is it time? Should I get the doctor?" "No, no," she reassured him, taking his hand and placing it where the baby was kicking vigorously. Someone just wanted to join the celebration. The wonder on Isaac's face as he felt their child move was something Ophelia knew she would cherish forever. In that moment, the last lingering shadows of her past disappeared entirely. This was where she belonged. This was home. The baby arrived 3 weeks later during a howling blizzard that made fetching Doc Williams impossible. Sarah Henderson, who had assisted at many births on the ranch, took charge with quiet competence, while Isaac paced anxiously outside the bedroom door. After hours of labor, Ophelia's son made his entrance into the world with a robust cry that immediately brought his father rushing into the room. "A boy," Sarah announced, placing the swaddled infant in Ophelia's arms. "A fine, strong boy." Ophelia looked down at the tiny face, already seeing echoes of Isaac in the shape of his nose and chin. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Isaac sat carefully on the edge of the bed, his expression a mixture of awe and terror as he reached out to touch his son's hand. The baby's fingers immediately curled around his father's much larger one. "He's perfect," Isaac said, his voice thick with emotion. "Just like his mother." They named him William Thomas Everett, William after Isaac's father and Thomas after the ranch hand who had brought news of Isaac's injury to Ophelia. As winter gave way to spring, young Will thrived, growing stronger each day under the adoring eyes of his parents. Life settled into a new rhythm for the Everett family. The triple pine continued to prosper, and Ophelia found unexpected fulfillment in motherhood. She would often strap Will to her back while she tended her expanding garden or sit with him in the shade while reviewing the ranch accounts. On Will's first birthday, they hosted a small celebration with the ranch hands and a few friends from town, including Aunt Martha, who had become a doting honorary grandmother. "You've done well for yourself, girl," Aunt Martha said as they watched Isaac showing Will off to the guests, the baby perched proudly on his father's shoulders. "Found yourself a good man and built a good life." Ophelia smiled, her heart full. "I never expected to find this when I came west. I was just running away." "Sometimes running away leads you exactly where you need to be," her aunt replied with unexpected wisdom. "The Lord works in mysterious ways." The years that followed brought more blessings to the Everett family. A daughter, Elizabeth Martha, arrived in 1882, followed by another son, James, in 1884. The Triple Pine expanded as Isaac purchased neighboring properties, and Ophelia's garden evolved into a small but productive orchard that became known throughout the territory for its apples. By 1890, Desdemona had grown into a proper town, with a schoolhouse where Will and Elizabeth attended classes, a new church where Ophelia directed the choir, and even a small library that she had helped establish with books ordered from back east. On a warm September evening in 1890, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple, Isaac took Ophelia's hand in his. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Coming west, marrying a rough cowboy instead of some cultured Boston gentleman?" Ophelia looked at him, this man who had healed her heart and given her a life beyond anything she could have imagined. At 42, his dark hair was now threaded with silver, and lines fanned from the corners of his eyes evidence of years spent in the Wyoming sun. But to her, he was as handsome as the day he'd first tipped his hat to her on Desdemona's dusty street. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for a single moment." He smiled, bringing her hand to his lips. "I was thinking about what you said when you first agreed to marry me about me helping you remember how to love again. I've always felt it was the other way around. You taught me that there was more to life than just work and duty." In the yard below, their children were engaged in an impromptu game of tag, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Will, now 11 and looking more like his father every day, was letting his 5-year-old brother catch him, while Elizabeth, 8 and fiercely independent, directed the game with the authority of someone twice her age. "We built something beautiful here, didn't we?" Ophelia murmured, leaning against her husband's shoulder. "We're still building," Isaac replied, his arm coming around her. "And I plan to keep building with you for at least another 40 years. They sat together as twilight deepened into night, watching as the first stars appeared in the vast Wyoming sky. Ophelia thought about the frightened, heartbroken young woman who had stepped off the train in Desdemona 12 years earlier, seeking only escape and anonymity. How could she have known that in running from her past, she would find not just safety but joy, purpose, and a love that continued to deepen with each passing year? "I love you, Isaac Everett," she said softly. "And I love you, Ophelia Everett," he replied, "until the stars fall from the sky." As if on cue, a shooting star streaked across the darkening heavens. Their children pointed and exclaimed in delight, calling for their parents to make wishes. Ophelia closed her eyes, but for once, she couldn't think of anything to wish for. Everything she had ever truly wanted was already here, in this home they had built together. In this life they continued to shape with love, respect, and shared dreams. In the end, she had not just escaped her past, she had discovered a future far richer than anything she could have imagined that day she decided to journey west. And for that, she would be forever grateful. 5 years later, in 1895, the Triple Pine Ranch hosted a grand celebration for Isaac and Ophelia's 17th wedding anniversary. Friends and neighbors from miles around gathered to honor the couple who had become pillars of the community. The ranch itself had grown into one of the most successful operations in the territory. With Will, now 16, learning the business at his father's side, and Elizabeth showing her mother's head for figures, the Everett legacy seemed secure for generations to come. As evening fell and lanterns were lit throughout the yard, Isaac stood and raised a glass to his wife. To Ophelia, who came west with nothing but courage and found it in her heart to love a simple rancher. You are the heart of this family and this ranch." Tears shimmered in Ophelia's eyes as she smiled back at him. "And to Isaac, who taught me that true love is built day by day through kindness, respect, and unwavering support. You helped me heal when I thought I was beyond repair." Later, as they danced under the stars to the music of a local fiddle player, Isaac held her close. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd stayed in Boston?" he asked. Ophelia shook her head. "That life feels like it belonged to someone else entirely. This you, our children, this land, this is who I was always meant to be." "I think so too," he murmured against her hair, "as if all the roads in our lives were leading us to find each other in Desdemona." As they turned slowly in the dance, Ophelia caught sight of their children while standing tall and straight, already showing the leadership that would one day make him a fine master of the ranch. Elizabeth in animated conversation with the schoolteacher's daughter, her quick mind and determined spirit evident in every gesture. And young James, practicing his lasso skills on the edge of the gathering, his father's patience and his mother's creativity blended perfectly. This was her legacy, not the social standing she had once valued in Boston, but these three remarkable people who carried the best of both their parents forward into a new era. And beyond them, the community they had helped build, the lives they had touched through their generosity and example. "I came west to forget," Ophelia said softly, "but instead I found everything worth remembering." Isaac's arms tightened around her, "And we're still making memories. The best ones are yet to come." As the celebration continued around them, Ophelia knew with absolute certainty that he was right. The journey that had begun in grief and fear had led her to a life overflowing with love and purpose. She had traveled west to escape her past, only to discover that sometimes the longest journeys lead us exactly where we belong. Under the vast Wyoming sky, surrounded by the family and community they had built together, Isaac and Ophelia Everett continued their dance, a dance that had begun 12 years earlier with a chance meeting on a dusty street, and would continue, step by step, heart to heart, for all the years to come.